Can I thank the Home Secretary for the advance sight of her statement and join her in paying tribute to the victims and survivors of this hideous crime. Many of those victims and survivors have been crucial to establishing the inquiry in the first place and also have been involved working hard to make sure that voices are heard and their strength should be recognised, their calls to action must be heeded. There is no more hideous crime than child sexual exploitation and abuse, a crime that preys on vulnerability and leaves scars that are felt for the rest of a young person's life. And the independent inquiry set up by the Home Secretary's predecessor, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead, identified failings across a wide range of institutional settings and including local councils, the Anglican and Catholic churches, organised groups and networks, and in each area, action is needed to make sure that that abuse is tackled wherever it is found. Can I welcome the government's acceptance that there needs to be a redress scheme for victims and survivors of historic abuse? And can I ask her the timetable and what the next steps will be on this, as that trauma can last a lifetime and is truly devastating for those who experience it. But can I also say to the Home Secretary, the rest of the statement is inadequate as a government response to such a serious and weighty report. I'm glad she's accepted the need to act on 19 out of 20 recommendations. That is not the same as accepting the recommendations, nor is it the same as setting out what action she's actually going to take. For example, the inquiry said that victims and survivors should receive a guarantee of specialist therapeutic support. All her statement says is we will elicit views on the future of therapeutic support. Well, we know that therapeutic support is inadequate, and we know that there are lots of views already. That was the whole point of the inquiry, to gather those views and that evidence. And on many of the recommendations, there is little detail, and all she has done is simply point to what the government is doing already. I really hope that there is more in the full report that she refers to, but there is far too little to give any confidence in the statement that she has set out today. On mandatory reporting for child sexual abuse, Labour called for this near a decade ago. The government finally agreed to do it in April, but all she's done today is open a call for evidence. Well, there have already been lots of calls for evidence. In fact, the inquiry gathered lots of evidence, and at best she could have launched her own call for evidence some time ago. Why isn't the mandatory reporting in the Victims' Bill? That is our opportunity to make progress rapidly. And it is far too weak in her response on online child sexual abuse. She's referred to the bill. We know that is long delayed and watered down, but this is not just about the legislation, it's also about the action that is taken. Since then, we've had an inspectorate report on online abuse that described the police response to online child sexual abuse and exploitation as too often leaving vulnerable children at risk, with examples of police taking up to 18 months to make an arrest after becoming aware children were at risk of abuse. There was nothing on that in her statement. What action is she going to take on policing? New evidence too from the Internet Watch Foundation finding that the number of web pages containing Category A material has more than doubled since 2020, just in the last few years alone. And again, the response is wholly inadequate. On charging, we know that the charge rates have got worse and worse. Every year, approximately 500,000 children will be sexually abused. Only 1 in 5 of those are likely to report their abuse. But only 11% of the cases that are reported result in a charge, down from over 30% in 2015. It has got so much worse over the last few years. That means the overwhelming majority of child sexual abusers are facing no consequences. Criminals are getting away with these terrible, terrible crimes. It's even got worse than the last time we discussed this topic in the House in October as well. And on child protection, and the barring service. Again, we have warned about gaps in the disclosure and barring system. Again, there are still problems there, and only last year we had unaccompanied asylum-seeking children being placed in hotels without properly trained DBS staff. What has she done since then, even to reform child protection in her own department? Children and teenagers have paid the price of the country's failure to tackle child sexual abuse and exploitation. The Home Secretary's predecessor did rightly set up this inquiry, but there is a responsibility on every single one of us, and in particular on the Home Secretary and on the government, to make sure that there is actually action that takes place. This is about the victims and survivors, but it is also about future generations of children whose safety and lives will be at risk if we do not see action.